Dial. The Sean Hannity Show is back.
All right, if you're just joining us, 5.9 magnitude earthquake in Virginia. One thing we do know is in places like New York and in D.C. and elsewhere, even Long Island, numerous buildings have been evacuated as a precaution. No major structural issues have been reported. In D.C., there were a few minor injuries reported, nothing major, thank God. We know, for example, that the subway system in New York is working as it usually does. And the Ecuadorian embassy in D.C., you guys have a button pushed in there, by the way. I don't know who's listening. The Ecuadorian handful of schools in D.C., FDNY, reports they have not received any reports of major structural issues, and so on and so forth. No impact on electrical services in New York. Amtrak reports no damage to infrastructure in Penn Station or the New York tunnel system, as that goes all the way through and down to D.C. It's a train that I have taken often in my life. Part of the Central Tower, this is just on the Drudge Report, of the National Cathedral, the highest point in Washington, was damaged, according to a spokesman. It looks like three pinnacles have broken off the Central Tower. That's one piece of damage that is heartbreaking. But again, no major loss of life reported at this moment, and we'll continue to monitor this. A lot of people don't know we have this major fault line that runs right through New York. Seismologists over at Columbia University have determined that New York City is way overdue for this major earthquake. And the last significant quake was back in the 1700s, and before that there was one in the late 1600s when the Dutch were in charge, and it knocked people off their feet. Now, since then, there have been a number of smaller quakes in and around, for example, New York City in the Northeast, mostly not felt by anybody. A moderate quake was along the Ramapo fault line in upstate New York, and that was in 1951, and in northern New Jersey. And the fault line is capable of what they consider to be a 6-magnitude earthquake. What many people don't realize is there's a major fault, literally a fault line under the 14th Street, right under 14th Street in New York City, in Manhattan. And that was discovered back in the 1930s when a subway line was extended. And the drill cut through the rock and suddenly hit open space, and then workers looked inside the opening and they saw a huge cavern that seemed to go very deep and very wide, and it was sealed up quickly and nothing mentioned to the media at that time. And that fault line, even moderately, many buildings throughout New York could sustain damage. Anyway, we have our good friend from weatherbell.com, Joe Bastardi, is back with us. Joe, thanks for being with us.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Believe it or not, I'm down in Houston, and every time I come down here, something wild happens with the weather or something else goes on. And my home base is in Pennsylvania. We have an office in New York City, but I missed the earthquake, so it's just very interesting.
Well, because nobody's hurt, and I think just people got nervous, only you, Joe Bastardi, you're the only guy that I know that when I talked to you earlier today, we were talking about the hurricane that's coming up and headed straight to New York City and Long Island. You said, I hope I can get up there. I'm hoping that I want to get right in Atlantic City and watch it.
Look, my son Garrett, and my father's a meteorologist, and my son Garrett wants to be a meteorologist. He's a great golfer already, and he loves, I wrestled in college. He wants to golf, and he wants to be a meteorologist. He's already looking at Oklahoma and Texas A&M, believe it or not, because they have good golf and meteorology schools. But he wants to ride out a storm with Grandpa. He sees pictures of me when I was a kid. We rode out Hurricane Bell and Hurricane Doria, and my mother would take pictures of us, just gazing out there. My father, who grew up in New England in the 50s, the 30s, 40s, and 50s, would tell me the story of the hurricanes. And I bonded with my dad through the weather in a lot of cases. And so Garrett wants to go. We were down there for the blizzard just after Christmas. But he says, come on, Dad, let's just go over there. And initially I said yes, and then I started thinking, here's something, Joe, you're involved in a business. You can't be in a place where the power's out, and I think that's going to happen up and down the eastern seaboard, folks. And I want people to understand that we are long overdue. In 2006, I made a statement that by 2015, we should have 2 major hurricanes hit the eastern seaboard. That's not, hyping. It's a matter of identifying the elephant in the room. When the Pacific starts to cool as it is now, and the Atlantic is warm, that happened in the 1950s, the major hurricane traps tend to shift to the eastern seaboard of the United States. I want people to put all these things in perspective. In 1954, there was a tremendous heat wave and drought across Texas. I know a lot about that because my dad's an Aggie, and 54 is the year the Junction Boys with Bear Bryant. It was the worst heat wave that Texas had seen in years. It was as bad as the 1930s. And so you learned about that. And sure enough, in 54, 3 hurricanes ran the eastern seaboard, right?
Yeah.
So you see the similarities in the past.
I know you're just fascinated by this, and it's amazing how it's been passed. Your passion has been passed down from generation to generation of Bastardis. For example, I'm looking at the Drudge headline: earthquake, now hurricane next.
Yeah, at first it's what I do. Even though I'm on with you and you see me on TV. When we do a weather bell is we, across the entire globe, we try to give people warnings. So this storm, you could see this coming 10 days in advance. And what happens is, and what I do, for instance, in the insurance industry, this is a nasty situation. Energy, it's the opposite. You knock out power, people don't use energy for 2, 3, 4 days. So there's a drain on energy, and people want to know that stuff in advance. So that's why, you have to get involved in it, because in a competitive society, assuming we still have capitalism and competition, which I'm hoping we always do, you have to be right or you get fired. That's what happens to me. If I'm not right enough, people fire me. So I'm into what I'm doing, obviously.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit. Now we'll shift gears. We'll move to this hurricane here. Where the Bahamas is about to get literally slammed.
Yeah, they're going to get it. I was just down there. I have a real good friend who invites us down there, and we were down at Exuma, and over there at Atlantis and Albany, there at Nassau. And this is going to be very similar to Floyd in 1999. It's going to use the stepping stones, and probably what we call the stepping stones, up the Bahama chain, probably spurring Nassau the worst. I think Nassau is going to get wind gusts out of the north to 80 to 100 miles an hour, but they won't get the type of storm surge they had in 92 when Andrew came across from the east. However, those islands to the east, like I said, Exuma and on up to Eleuthera, those places are liable to really take it right on the noggin. As a matter of fact, the very place we were staying at in Exuma is probably going to get hammered real bad later tomorrow night. With winds over 100, 120 miles an hour.
Let's talk about Florida, the Carolinas, Georgia. Where does it hit first?
This is not a problem in Florida, except for there may be some rough surf. North winds, 30 gusts to 40 miles an hour. Undertow, it'll be what I call a surfer storm, because I'm sure you growing up on Long Island knew those guys. I grew up on the Jersey Shore, where they just love seeing hurricanes go by 100 miles to the east, because then they can go out and surf. Me, I would never do that. But this is not a problem for Florida, and will pass well to the east of Florida. I'd say over 100, 150 miles east, probably 100 to 150 miles east of the Georgia coast. Once you get up toward Myrtle Beach, it'll get rougher. The path of this reminds me of a cross between Gloria in 85, which went right up over Long Island, and Floyd in 99. And we're talking the idea that this thing comes into the Outer Banks and then tries to come straight northward, hugging the coastline. We did see a storm in 1821 do this, and it knocked down all the trees east of what is now the Garden State Parkway in New Jersey. It was a very, very powerful hit that came straight north. Usually they try to fade to the east a little bit, but this is a multi-billion-dollar storm, I believe, from the eastern Carolinas on up through New Jersey and New England. The ground is saturated. The trees are full of water. This is going to cause a lot of tree damage, a lot of power outages. And people, I'm not trying to scare you, but this is what happens, and we're long overdue for this.
But some of the models now have it moving out east. Where do you see this hitting? And you're saying it may...
The model. Well, Sean, the same models had this thing coming into Texas, and you saw people bite on the models. Look, here's what's going on. You got a big ridge over the Rocky Mountains, okay? You got an upper ridge over the Rocky Mountains. You got a big, strong Bermuda high, all right? What happens with the models is the models try to feed back and feed heat into the atmosphere, and by doing that, they try to force the storm out to the northeast. You see with the snowstorm. Remember the blizzard that hit right after Christmas? Thursday, everybody was calling the blizzard off. I wasn't, but everybody...
Let me keep you focused. Let me keep you focused here. What do you project? And look, I've never met anybody that has a knowledge and a history of every storm. Look, my sister's house got wrecked during Hurricane Gloria. But let me focus on, walk me through as of today. And we're not going to hold you to this because, look, this is not
you should be right. I mean, all
right, but where do you see this thing landing, and where do you see this? You think this is going to hug the East Coast, the Eastern Seaboard, and go right over Long Island?
Here's a big problem with this. It's not going to be some dinky little storm with hurricane-force winds out 25 miles to the west. Even if it goes 100 miles southeast of New York City, you're going to get hurricane conditions on the Jersey Shore into New York City and Long Island. I think it's going to pass. I think this thing is coming in between Cape Fear and Cape Hatteras. I think it is probably going to be near the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay Sunday morning and right over top of Long Island, perhaps even New York City Sunday night. So I think it's going to hug the coast. If it goes west of New York City, that exposes New York and the Jersey Shore to strong east to southeast winds. If it goes a little bit to the east, the problem is the water is so darn warm this year. That's why you're getting all the very heavy thunderstorms and everything else, that it will still maintain itself and be a devastating storm in New England. But this is what I'm very, very concerned about with Providence and out there at the Hamptons, even though I never get invited to parties out there. You know what I'm talking about.
You and me both.
The fact of the matter is, if this goes just east of Hatteras and hits New England directly from the south, then you're looking at 54 and 38 because this is going to be one heck of a storm.
What does it mean if a Category 3, 4 hurricane hits New York City with all its skyscrapers? What kind of damage are you talking about?
Look, New York, I believe the hype for New York City is way overplayed with hurricanes. Okay?
Explain why. That's why I'm asking. You said it might hit New York and the Jersey Shore, Long Island. What do you mean?
But there's different places. You have a 2-mile wide opening in New York City of Verrazano Narrows to try to stuff a storm surge up Delaware Bay. If you ever hit the Port of Philadelphia with a flood coming down the Delaware River from the rain and the funnel shape, just like Narragansett Bay, of Delaware Bay, the Port of Philadelphia, with a storm cutting straight northward or northwestward up the Delmarva Peninsula, is in bigger trouble than New York. The place that gets hammered, and all you need to do is look at the history of New York City hurricanes. We get bad hurricanes, power outages, and everything else, but it's Long Island that takes the big hits. It's Rhode Island that takes the big hits. Atlantic City can take a big hit on a storm coming from the south because their beach base is south.
All right, you know where I live, right? I live in Long Island. All right, so my question is, when you say a big hit, when is it going to come, and what could we expect?
Well, I think your power is probably going to be out on the order of what was out at your sister's house with Gloria. I mean, that's what it will produce, that type of thing. Maybe they're better at getting the power back. I think if you remember on Long Island in '92, that December '92 storm, how bad that was. There was hurricane force winds and everything else out there, even though there was a lot of snow with that particular storm. You have a storm of that magnitude, 60 to 80, gusts to 90 miles an hour. And the big thing I'm worried about is, folks, there's so many things that go on. Look at your trees. If you live along the eastern seaboard, you notice how they lean toward the south and southeast? They lean toward the sun a little bit because the sun comes around, rises in the east, sets in the west. Well, the trees tend to lean that way. Well, an east to southeast wind blowing 50 to 70 miles an hour does more damage than a northwest wind blowing the same way because the trees can take the northwest wind. They can't take the east-southeast wind. It's almost like having an airplane wind. So the crucial factor here is if this storm comes straight north and cuts up over New Jersey, and you get that east to southeast wind, there's even more tree damage. So there are a lot of things at play, but a severe storm, certainly the worst one for the Northeast since Floyd in '99, and probably back to Gloria in '85, I believe is on the way from the Outer Banks of North Carolina.
When is the storm? I'm running out of time. When is the storm going to hit the states, and when is it going to hit New York? Give me those dates.
I think the landfall in the North Carolina Outer Banks is between noon and 9 p.m. on Saturday.
North Carolina, noon and 9 p.m. on Saturday, and it's going to hug the East Coast, and then it's going to go right over Long Island into Rhode Island.
Mouth of the Chesapeake Bay Sunday morning.
Okay.
I think it's up there in New York City Sunday night and on into New England. And by the way, without trying to pile on, this is not the last threat this year.
No, you said this last year. I mean, I remember your prediction. And how and when is it gone? When does it stop raining?
I think Sunday afternoon there'll be birds flying around with olive branches in their mouth for a while. So it'll all be over Sunday afternoon.
In New York?
In New York City, it'll probably be over Sunday afternoon or Sunday night. But the damage
is going to be massive.
Well, no, let me restate that. I'm sorry. Let me make sure I have my timing down. It'll be done Monday in New York City, okay? The days blend together sometimes.
It'll be done by Monday morning.
By Monday morning in New York City. And then it's going to get very warm and humid next week. It'll be cool for a couple of days. Remember what happened after Gloria? It got very warm. After Bob, it got very warm. So it will be a tropical air mass as we head for the Labor Day weekend.
All right, Joe, look, I got more questions. I'm going to bring you back later in the